Thank you, Riaz. Hopefully I'm audible. Great. So a lot of exciting sessions since the morning talking about different aspects of Gen AI. And as we think about the field itself, right, November 2022 is a keynote in that journey for Gen AI because that is when ChatGPT came into being. But that's 10 months ago. A lot has changed since then. Recently, OpenAI announced that they are incorporating real-time data into search results and other outputs that they can generate using different versions of ChatGPT. Along with that, different developments are happening on the multimodal side of things as well, moving away from only using text or only using image data to do different things. But those are all still in the research phase right now. What we are here today to discuss is how enterprises today are looking at different use cases, different things that they are trying to do internally as well as externally to drive value from generative AI. With that, I'll actually invite Gopal to talk about the kind of use cases, Gopal, that you and your team are looking at within Intel and the outcomes that you're driving with that.
Sure. Thank you, Bhaskar. So fundamentally, the AI Center of Excellence in Intel India is driving solutions and capabilities in AI space for internal consumption of Intel. So some of the capabilities we are looking at is in the space of assisting and augmenting our design engineers. So three broad use cases I'll touch upon. First and foremost is design engineers. If you look at the silicon design engineers, they are confronted with a multitude of specifications like hardware architecture specification, micro architecture specifications. So how do they use this specification or search and retrieve the right portion of the specification for them to do the next level of design activity? That's one area where we are looking at deploying an LLM. In fact, it is already in the MVP stage, so some of the beta users are using it. The second one we are looking at is design engineers do move around between client group to server group to SOC teams. So when they move, they need to ramp up quickly on the code base that is already there. So we are looking at how we can provide code summarization, code explanation to these engineers as they move around teams. And also, when they look at a new code for debugging purposes, how can they quickly get an idea about what is happening in the code? That's the second one we are looking at. And the third is the holy grail of LLMs, which is how can we generate code itself? Again, semiconductor industry, not much. LLMs do not know much about semiconductor industry because beyond VLSI books, you don't see much in the public, right? So what happens is these LLMs are fairly limited in terms of their knowledge in knowing about VLSI design or semiconductor design. So code generation is the most complex step where we are in our early stages. Thank you.
Got it. That's actually very interesting that you speak about because we were just discussing earlier about, for example, the next wave that is coming in around quantum computing and material sciences and the impact that it's having there. But then the key part, as you rightly said, is the context. And that's where I'll bring in maybe Ashwini, given your experience in the banking and financial services area. How important is context and what else are you guys thinking about as you're working with different clients in that area?
No, thank you, Bhaskar, and I think very good question. I was thinking of a technical answer, but as we went through all the sessions, Prateek took a great one explaining how some of the nuances of Gen AI are coming together. So I was thinking in my mind on how to simplify that message. So I'll probably use, a more simplified framework to encapsulate what we have been discussing since morning. I'll call it a CPV framework, right? Where it's really about 3 C's, 3 P's, and 3 V's. Just bear with me. I was thinking through just in the morning. But as what Gen AI has really done for us is gave us a capability that can encapsulate context and make it available for consumption, right? So when I say capability, all the LLMs, foundational models, the methodologies to do RAG, to do PEFT, how do I do chunking, embedding, all of that. But it's really about being able to capture context, which has already been made available. But then how do you use it in the context of a given industry? How do you use it in the context of my firm, my use cases? So, and then that is where the consumption becomes important, which is where the use cases start to, play a role. So as we go through 3 C's, which is how do I use the capability that has already captured certain context for consumption, what are the possibilities, right? And we talk about codex, as Gopalan talked about, being able to generate codes is one part, being able to search, summarize is another part, right? And being able to generate is probably the biggest revolution, which is where I'll say the 3 P's, which is ability to personalize, because I can generate content which is specific to customers. I can generate content which is specific when we see dashboards, and we are trying to use GenAI on dashboards and underlying data, for example, the content that a CXO will see or a business head would see versus an operations guy or a campaign head would see, right? So being able to personalize, being able to drive productivity, and being able to drive programming-related benefits, which is, most of the codex side of things come. As it has opened up the 3 P's, which is the possibilities, the way I would say is now banks are starting to see, and all firms are starting to see the 3 V's, which is how do I truly use it for value, right? So value in the context of a bank, in the context of a specific bank, like a policymaker or an underwriter needs to know about policies and regulations of the banking industry as they're doing some of their design work, right? A customer service agent needs to know about data as well as its own credit card policies while it's talking to customer, etc. So as you go about use cases and this value, the veracity of it, which is the quality of the models that we use and hence how does it drive the value, the risks of data residency, the risks of, am I making wrong decisions, are there right guardrails in place, etc. So the veracity is important. And then the viability, what is really the complexity that I'm, waking up to and I'm really adopting, and what is the cost of it. So it's really about, am I using the capabilities in the right context to, to use the, possibilities that have opened up to drive value, while I look at cost.
Absolutely, and greatly, rightly put there, Ashwini. The other aspect also, and I'll maybe use that as a cue to maybe bring in Mahesh, because banking is a highly regulated industry. What you can do, how you can do, and what goes in front of people is controlled. And the other application of GenAI that comes in there is protein design, drug discovery, which we saw come to life with vaccines very recently, but then there is a lot of work that teams within pharma are doing. So Mahesh, given your experience, what are you seeing there? What are the key constraints that you are facing as you look at different applications?
Sure. So one of the things that's happened, so obviously, when you talk about protein design, right? We know what happened with AlphaFold many years ago, right? The ability to, create, break down proteins, get the molecular structure out, happened quite a few years ago. But it's not until recently that you actually had an AI-generated molecule out in clinical trials, right? And we don't know how successful that's going to be, but what has happened is, obviously ChatGPT was great. Everybody wanted to think about, and not just ChatGPT, but all kinds of LLMs were great for a while because, the whole low-hanging fruit of summarizing, data for clinical study reports, for other kinds of things worked, right? But now with the new second age of LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT 4, Llama 2s or whatever, the multimodal part is where, things are starting to really explode, right? So the ability to design, drugs, molecules, give outputs in a structure, in a graph. Those are the kinds of things that are now beginning to, really accelerate the use of large language models actually in the pharma space. The other aspect that is really important right now is this concept of digital avatars, right? So think about it, you have investigators who are essentially, talking to patients, explaining to them the study protocol, but then, it's 2 p.m. and they are tired and they haven't had lunch and somebody comes and asks them a question and obviously the answer is not as good as it would have been at 9 a.m. with the first patient that they've come across, right? So now, what you're saying is you have a digital avatar which can actually speak to the patient with the same level of care, empathy and concern, irrespective of whether it's lunchtime or not. And so this whole thing about digital avatars, being able to have digital twins of patients where you can model without having to have subjects, that's another exploding space, and some of the work that Pfizer is doing with collaborations. And really the last part that I wanted to touch upon is this whole thing around, context of thought, right? The COT engineering bit. The chain of thought bit, right? So what's happening here is, in a way now, one of the biggest things that's in the pharma space is you can never take the human out of the loop, right? You always have to have a human in, and explainability becomes a big, big part. So now to be able to tell, the algorithm to say, give me a chain of thought, give me a reasoning, and tell me why this would work this way, right? And explain to me why are you suggesting this particular thing. I think that has been tremendous. It's opened up a whole can of, sort of possibilities for us in terms of where are some of these areas where we can actually use COT engineering to go through our, some of the, let's say, standard processes that we were doing. So these are some areas I think that has been phenomenal. The regulators, obviously, as you said, very highly regulated. So there is a little bit of that. But I think, with some of this COT kind of approaches, we're trying to get to that explainability bit as well.
God, and very, very interesting, and I'll maybe pick on the thread of digital avatars, because essentially it's about understanding the customer or the consumer and then trying to create something for that. And with that, I'll actually bring in Nithya. Given your experience within the CPG, FMCG space, what kind of use cases are you seeing related to that? And then how does that help you define maybe your data and IT strategy as you move forward?
Yeah. So first of all, I would want to clarify one thing, that my organization, it has changed, the name from Kellogg to Kellanova. So I would be referencing my organization as Kellanova henceforth. So just don't be confused if I say so. So in CPG, there are a lot of areas where generative AI can bring tremendous amount of value. In Kellanova, we are kind of researching in some of the areas which are predominantly in commercial space, right, in marketing and commercial space. The primary objective is to understand the customer preferences in terms of taste, in terms of, not only taste, in terms of packaging and in terms of convenience. Right? So what really works for a certain segment of customers and certain geography does not essentially need to work for the others. So there's a hell lot of data that we need to kind of process in order to come up with the right kind of taste, right kind of packaging size, right sort of package, etc. Apart from that, our trade promotion optimization applications are extremely kind of dependent on, I would say, the intelligence that we get out of lots of data in the internet, right? So there, generative AI can help us. And also, like typical chat applications, which our marketing team would use in order to understand the right kind of promos in the right kind of channel, right kind of marketing campaigns, etc. So having said that, right, as organizations, not just CPG, but across the various industries, we have a certain aspiration of making the best use of generative AI, right? If you talk to a CXOs, they will say, yeah, wow, we have this generative AI, it's a magic wand, let's see what we can do about it. But then unless all of this is translated into a very solid IT strategy, data strategy, and people strategy, I think, it's all going to be just buzzword. So probably people strategy is a whole new topic that we might touch upon later, but IT strategy and data strategy is very, very core to it, right? And given the fact that this technology itself is evolving, right, we probably can aspire, but it's not practical to think very long term, like 5 years, 6 year strategy. So we might think about what in the next 2 years we want to do with generative AI. And given all the uncertainties, we would want to go after the use cases, right? And the really key ones, the ones that where there is a definite requirement of generative AI in terms of bringing the best outcome, and an ROI, right? And accordingly, we need to design the strategy for the next 2 years, and then what sort of infrastructure we need to invest in, what sort of technology we need to invest in for the next 2 years. So if you primarily kind of bucketize the kind of infrastructure and technology we would need, the first and foremost is the foundation, which is the foundational, the data acquisition, storage, and compute, right? And now given all the SaaS solutions, all the cloud providers around, it's no-brainer that we would be deploying, we'll be using them or engaging more with them even in deploying our generative AI applications. But then again, if I throw open this question to the audience here, right, how many of you guys feel that in your organization, you guys are technologically at a place where you can start harnessing Gen AI, right? Probably if I throw this question open here, how many of you really think that your organizations in terms of their infrastructure are really capable as on date to harness Gen AI? Awesome. Surprising to see a few hands, but when I ask this question to a lot of people in the past, I say that we are struggling with very fundamental data foundation, governance, data quality, and all of that, right? So that's kind of very perplexing, and we are talking about generative AI. Right, so infrastructure, data foundation governance is very critical. And then of course, in order to kind of not repeat or reinvent the wheel, we need to kind of leverage the foundational data models which are available out there, and there are plenty of them. And we need to purpose build our solutions, purpose build our architecture in order to kind of go after the use cases, find the right kind of foundational models, catalog the right kind of foundation models, right? There are multiple technologies that we can do that. Foundational model itself, they are, you can have paid models, you can have open source models, and then,
On the foundation models, I just wanted to maybe quickly bring in Rajat as well, right? Yeah. Because a large part of implementation, as you were rightly talking about, Nithya, actually dovetails into transformation for businesses in terms of people, processes on existing as well as new ones that we are setting up. So Rajat, how are you seeing that play out with enterprises?
Sure. So in general, when we speak to our clients, when we speak to the CEO, or when we accompany a CEO in her board presentation, value is the foremost thing that we look up to. And we see that there are 3 vectors of value which are coming out. So the first group is your reimagining the function. So within a function, if there are places where Gen AI can actually intervene and deliver a transformative or an exponential value. That is the foremost thing which we are seeing. I mean, if you call about 80% of the cases, we are seeing organizations there. And a lot of them have started to scale up and encash some of the value there. The second is the reimagining the entire organizations, which means across your enterprise, there are multiple Gen AI, some may be linked, some may be interlinked, some may not be interlinked. How are they multiple use cases coming together to have a more transformative impact? And the third bucket, which is fairly, at least to me, is aspirational, and I haven't seen a lot of organizations there, but some of them at least have a vision to reach there, is actually creating a new unicorn out of this Gen AI technology around that. As I said, majority of the organization lies in the first bucket there. And if we start talking about some numbers or at least some real life examples there, and I've seen like the banking, I think, needless to say, they have the right infrastructure, as Nithya also mentioned, at least to start off this journey in a better manner. I've seen hyper-personalizations, use cases of AI now being complemented and supported by AI. So AI is not just a new technology which is standing alone, it is complementing your existing AI or ML solutions which you have already created. So a hyper-personalization where, let's say, 2 of us needs to receive a same offer, similar campaigns, different images or different messages are coming out now. Maybe delivered through let's say, behavioral economics, nudge theory, for whatever reasons. But a large amount of content can be generated and thrown up to the customer, which has a better efficacy and have a better ROI on that front. Now, the second part, which I think we also touched upon it, is that what is actually the key success factor for this value? See, something which BCG has been using it for about 10 plus years, and there's an iceberg that we call it as, where the tip of the iceberg is actually your 10% data, 20% tech, but the remaining hidden part is about 70%, where we say that this is the change part. Now, change is difficult. The change comprises of the people element there. One of the survey actually suggested that the tech transformations or the digital transformation, the key reason for failure is not the tech or a data, but actually the people part. How do you bring or train or upskill your set of people to ensure that they deliver this kind of a technology? Or rather, I would say, how do you change the last mile delivery with the people to ensure that the adoption happens? People start to use that for their value realization. That reluctance, how do you end up How do you remove that inertia? That degree of change management, that is the entire gamut of the success criteria of that. You bring in the right set of processes, which every place would have it. And this is what the success mantra that we have seen after implementing this, any tech transformation or digital transformation for last 10 years on this front. I'll just conclude with one part. I think Samir was also mentioned about the provocation part. See, what I'm seeing right in the market also that it's a good toy to play around that. And people really misses out on the scale and the value part of that. I think that is super critical on that, because if you do not have a scalable, sustainable value, it's not going to give you the right return. Tokens are expensive. How do we ensure that we do the economics right and get the dollar value out for us? And I think no conversation can end without responsible AI. So I think 2 bits on that. So ensuring that you have the right guardrails to make sure this ends up in a responsible way.
Absolutely, and a great point, because I actually wanted to put all of you on the spot. Maybe 30 seconds each on the biggest roadblock that you see for implementation of Gen AI solutions. Nithya, maybe we could start with you.
Okay. So the biggest roadblock is kind of bridging the current gaps as we see, right? So working on the current challenges around, in case of generative AI, very relevant to some industries, explainability, right? Improving the trust that people place on AI by kind of making it more responsible, right? Taking care of the bias considerations which are there. And also on the longer run, if you think about it, choosing the right kind of applications fit for purpose where you get the return on investment.
Got it. Gopal, maybe did you want to go next?
In my view, the roadblock that I have been encountering is, one is the model aspect. The other is when we get into niche area like semiconductor industry, you need to play with the model a little more in a sophisticated way beyond prompt engineering. So, if you're looking at supervised fine tuning or instructional tuning, you need to have label data. So everybody says data, but label data is very less. So obtaining label data from our end users and then feeding it into the model is a time-consuming effort because they all have a day job. That's the roadblock I see.
Got it. Mahesh, maybe.
Right. So I want to answer this in 2 parts. The first is what used to be a problem until now was, the whole thing around, the guardrails around hallucinations and stuff, right? I mean, so the pharma industry right now is trying to approach it 2 ways. One is to essentially say the corpus is limited. So you basically say, give me an answer from this kind of data, right? So you're not fine-tuning the model, but you're giving it a limited corpus. Or you're using, with the new, new LLMs, you can actually use it to validate itself. So you can actually spin off another GPT and say, hey, tell me what you've missed here, or tell me what is wrong here, right? So we are trying to do that, taking care of hallucinations. But going back to, I think I have to agree with where Gopalan is going with this, is labeled data, right? Because again, in our field as well, that is a rarity. So,
got it. Rajat, maybe you.
See, I think to me, it's definitely the economics that has to work out. These are fairly expensive solutions, and there have to be creativity to, as he also mentioned, the right data, the right technology. All this have to, I see it as a jigsaw puzzle, have to come together in place in the right economics. Then only, I think, a successful, scalable adoption will happen.
Got it. Maybe Ashwini to round it off.
Yep. No, I agree with Rajat, all of them, and Rajat as well saying what will work for me. And what is my investment, to Nithya's point, on technology, on what methods I pick and hence the cost. I'll add one incremental point, which I think Rajat was also making, is the human in the loop thing. It's also the problem, but it's also the solution, because ChatGPT everybody was using before the enterprises started to use. So for AI, we have been, to manage the change, we have been thinking how do you bring technology and people process together. That will be the roadblock here as well, on saying, as we make those use cases real, that will really change my processes, how I make decisions, how I impact customer experiences. But can I really, do it in a manner where people involved can embrace the change that technology is bringing, which may be a boon in disguise as well, because people are actually exploring ChatGPT along with enterprises.
Got it.
I'll steal 10 seconds. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. So another thing that we need to consider is the sustainability aspect of it, right? Of course, we can say that we are going to use the foundational models. We are going to fine tune it. We are not going to build everything from scratch. All this fine. So what is the impact that you are creating on your water footprinting and carbon footprinting is another thing that we need to look at and reduce. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the wonderful panel for bringing forth the right kind of use cases and how you guys are trying to actually implement solutions on the ground. With that, I'll hand it back to Riaz and the